Good morning, everybody. It's Bart from GiantScaleNews.com, and we're continuing now with the construction of our third scale Super Cub build from World Models. And in this first of the build videos, we're going to discuss the wing servo mounting parts and how they're put together. So to start out, there's 4 servos for the wing, and one for each flap and one for each aileron. And we're using the servos from our 50cc PAU Challenger build from this past year. And the servos are HV1240s from MKS. They're about 190 ounce inches at 7.4 volts, metal gears. They worked great in the pit, so we're just going to use them again in this airplane. And the way we're going to mount them is using these plates that are provided. There's a part number molded into them. They're a heavy-duty nylon plate, and the part number shows right for 3 of them and left for 1 of them. And if you look in the manual, it makes sense. I initially thought there should be 2 and 2, but the manual clearly shows it's 3 and 1. So if you open everything up, don't expect to see 2 and 2. But they're a heavy-duty nylon. They're covered on the outside with the Teflon material that they use on the rest of the airplane. So once they're screwed into place, they'll match. And what you want to do is you want to just drill 4 holes for each servo, and then I'm using these screws, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. They use a 5/64 nut driver, or not a nut driver, a Allen driver like this, and that's one of the tools you would need for this part of the job if you're choosing to use these screws. Otherwise, you just use the ones that come with the servos that have a Phillips head. But the difference with these types of servo mounts compared to wood that you would have in a different type of ARF, either a wood rail or a plywood rail, is that when you put these screws in, the nylon won't compress around the screw. It won't. It's kind of expanding at the same time it's compressing to allow the screw to go through the wood. And with nylon, you're not going to get that kind of give from the material, so you have to make sure you drill the hole large enough so that the nylon isn't trying to expand and potentially being forced to crack as the screw goes in. But you don't want the hole so big that the threads can't grab. So when you look at this screw, screws have, and this is basic stuff when it comes to hardware, but if you don't know it, it's kind of interesting to learn. The screws have an outside diameter and an inside diameter. So the outside diameter is the outside diameter of the threads, and that's what you would get if you put a micrometer on it. So you close it up on the threads, and it comes to about 0.088. Yeah, about 0.088 inches. So that's not really a handy fraction unless you get into 64ths or something. But the inside diameter is the solid part inside of the threads, and that, with this screw, that's about a 1/16 of an inch. The directions say to drill the holes at 1.5 millimeter because the whole airplane is done in millimeters, in metric. So 1.5 millimeters is actually about a 1/16 of an inch. So if you're using these screws, determine what the inside diameter of the screw is, and then drill the holes for your servo mounts. And again, that's going to keep this nylon arm, or this nylon rail that the servo attaches to, it's going to keep that from cracking when you put those screws in. So the parts that come for this part, the parts that are included for this part of the job, it's pretty much everything. You're going to get metric nuts and bolts that are the arm for the control arm, and on each of those there's a tab that threads on, and the tab and the servo arms they provide have bearings molded into them. So a lot of kits give you the arms that have the ball joints that are flexible. This has bearings in it, and the bearings will give you a very nice slop-free connection with no drag. So it's going to be a nice, smooth, slop-free connection, and they give you, everything is individually bagged. So I left these in the bags just to show you. The parts are all separated by individual bags, but they give you clevis type ends for the control rods. So when you're putting this all together, this will go through your control surface with one of these little plates above and below. Let me just pick them up. I'll get this one. So you put one of these down, you put the screw through it, another one comes up from the bottom, and then the nut tightens it all up. And they give you these little aerodynamic fairings that you can put over the head of the screw, and then from underneath there's one that also has a hole in it that comes up from underneath. So you have a nice aerodynamic, kind of scale looking appearance for your controls in the wings. Okay, and all the hardware is included. The servo arms attach to a standard round servo arm, I guess you would call that. I don't know if you call a round one a servo arm, but the round servo arm gets this tab bolted onto it. The hardware is all included. You need a 1.5 millimeter Allen driver for that, okay? And then just to put the screws into the wings, when you attach the plates, that's a number 1 Phillips head screwdriver, okay? And then, like I said, you need a 16th inch drill bit. People watching this are probably more likely to have fractional drill bits than you are metric. So a 16th inch drill bit for your servo screws. And then the last thing that I've done, and I'm using a 3/32 drill bit for that. When it comes to placing the holes for the servos, you just slide your servo. They fit really well, so this is a nicely made part. You just slide your servo into position, and then what I do is I use a drill bit that's just a little bit smaller than the hole where the servo goes, and I just drill for a few seconds as a center mark for each of those holes, and then I'll use my 16th inch bit centered in that little mark, and that'll be my hole for the servo screws. Now, when you're putting the screws into this nylon material, it's still going to be a little bit tight as those screws cut threads, and if that's the case, just give it a turn and then back it out a little bit and then put it in a little farther, and as it starts to get tight, just back it out a little bit and just sit, take your time. But that way you're going to cut threads into the nylon with the screw without cracking the nylon. Okay, and I haven't seen on the internet in comments that that's really common, where you would crack the nylon arm there, or the rail that holds the servo in place. But this is what comes with the kit. Looks like it should work pretty well. So you just want to put it together in a way that doesn't ruin it for you, and that's what it looks like once it's all assembled. Servo goes into place, the screws are nice and tight, the nylon holds the screws really well, and then the servo arm comes out the slot so that the servo is not visible on the bottom of the airframe or on the bottom of the wing. Depending on the servo components that you have, this one sits the arm a little bit higher off of the servo, so there's less clearance up here, and what I intend to do is just maybe take another 1/16 of an inch off of that slot so that this servo arm has a little bit of room to flex when the airplane's being flown, so that it won't bind or rub against the slot in the cover plate. Okay, so this is the hardware for mounting the servos to the wings. One last thing, when you put these arms onto your servo parts, the holes lined up in this case. I'm not sure if these are the stock ones from MKS that came with the servos or not, but when you put these 4 screws in to hold it, don't snug these down so much that they dig into the nylon. And also, once you do get them snug, just put a little dot of penetrating CA, because these are not lock nuts on the bottom, so you don't want them to come loose. A little bit of CA on there will keep it tight. Okay? So that's it. If you have any questions, feel free to post in the thread at giantscalenews.com. This is our it's half product review, half build thread, World Models 3rd Scale Super Cub. Okay, thank you for watching.